everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Resilience by Design. My name is Gemma. I'm an account director at Access Pay, and I'll be your host for this session. We're really excited to be joined by Clara Fawcett at Darlington Building Society and Raj Kohli at DCR Partners. Thank you both for taking your time out to have a conversation with us on this ever-evolving topic of operational resilience. Raj, Clara, would you like to do some further intros of yourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Gemma. My name is Raj Kohli. I'm the founder and managing director at DCR Partners. We're a technology, data and cyber risk consultancy, but ultimately what we do is help organisations who are trying to deliver better business outcomes, support their clients and customers in a better way, but do it in a way that builds resilience for a long-term sustainable organisation. My background is mainly in financial services. I've worked with small fintechs through to high growth businesses, through traditional players in the financial services market.
Well, thank you.
My name is Clara Fawcett. I'm Head of Operational Resilience at Darlington Building Society. I've worked within the financial services sector for the last 25 plus years, basically all of my career, and that spanned a variety of roles within distribution, operations and risk. Currently my role in Darlington has quite a broad span, including operational resilience, procurement, savings and payments, commercial and financial support teams.
Well, thanks both. And yeah, we've been speaking about the topic of operational resilience in a lot of detail over the past couple of weeks. And during those conversations, it's really become apparent that it's not really just a regulatory checkbox at the moment. So whether it's sort of cyber threats, supply chain disruptions, system failures, or even just the unexpected global events like pandemics, organisations today face an increasing number of complex and interconnected risks. So operational resilience isn't just about recovery, it's about ensuring that critical services can continue no matter what. And in highly regulated industries like your financial services, like legal, it's about maintaining the trust of your members and communities through continuity, adaptability and a proactive approach to risk. So today we'll explore what operational resilience really means in practice, how to embed it across your organisation, and what lessons we can take from real world scenarios. And it's not just, a compliance requirement, it is a strategic advantage. So for today, we'll explore how organisations like Darlington Building Society are navigating that landscape and gain the expertise from Raj, from DCR Partners, on what good looks like across the sector. So we're just going to kick things off around the journey of resilience. So Clara, could you start by sharing Darlington Building Society's operational journey, resilience journey? So what has been your transformation journey over the past few years?
Okay, so I've been with the society for about 8 years now. I would say or about the last 5 years, we've been on a transformation journey, which included resilience. We were needing to embrace more digital ways of working, both internally and externally, including our service offering. And to do this, we needed to increase our technical capability and our resilience. And this included more automated ways of working and moving away from physical hardware, physical IT assets and core infrastructure to more cloud-based services. So back in 2018, which is a little bit before we started our transformation journey, we were a very manual-based organisation. We were keying payments manually. We had lots of manual ways of working, and we knew that was a barrier to scale and also digital operations. So that was the starting point. So what we needed to do was think what were the next steps that we needed to complete to move us on that digital journey. That was part of the Ops Resilience regulation that was coming down the track. It wasn't actually a policy statement, but it was we were aware of it. So we were thinking about what our critical activities were and where we needed to invest. And quite quickly, as well as our core infrastructure, our payment services became a key area of investment for automation. So that's where we started.
Well, thanks, Clara. And Raj, just to support that, how would you actually typically support financial services clients on their operational resilience journeys? And how has that evolved over the recent years? I mean, particularly with the March deadline that's just passed.
Thanks, Gemma. I think maybe I'd start by going back a little bit around the history of OpsRes as to where my own experiences and where we've been as a business. So I guess we can see it very much as a recent regulatory requirement from the FCA and the PRA, but actually operational resilience has got a history that's rooted in probably the last 30 years, and that's broader than just the regulatory requirements. It's got a history around business continuity, disaster recovery, through to enterprise risk management and complex systems thinking. I guess every crisis or incident has taught us something new. So you can go back looking at the 2008 financial crisis, ash clouds, cyber attacks, and more recently global pandemics, exposing, that exposes weaknesses in how an organization operates, the systems it has in place, but also, to Clara's point, around dependencies that sometimes we don't actually knew existed. So I guess our clients and those that we work with see resilience probably more than just being about recovery. It's about designing for disruption, but importantly, the point that Clara started with was actually the business opportunity. How do we do things more effectively, more efficiently, and support our members and our customers in a slightly different way to also at the same time reduce risk? So typically, to your question, Gemma, how do we help organizations? It's really around helping them navigate what is the upside, what is the thing that they're trying to do to improve their business, whether that be improve customer service, reduce friction in the onboarding journey, through to building a bit of resilience in the way that they take payments. For us, it's about surfacing risk, making sure that they're making the right decisions around those risks and driving improvements targeted on the areas that matter most.
Well, that's really useful. Thank you, Raj. And I guess now that we've sort of spoken about the journey, the next phase is the adopting that shift towards the automation, as well as in terms of the strategic direction. So Clara, how has this specifically built greater resilience in your payment operations?
So back in about 2019, 2020, I think that's when we started engaging with an issue with Access Pay with regards to our payment automation journeys. Back at that point, as I mentioned, we were manually processing payments individually. If I think about where we are now to where we were then, there's no way we could have matched the growth in payments that we're completing now if we'd sort of stayed static. So it was really important to partner with Access Pay. And what we needed to do was look at our process end to end, map that journey out, and then understand how we then automated as much as possible that journey. Now we're a mid-sized building society. We don't currently complete real-time payments, but we needed to make far more moves forward to more real-time payment methods and the ability to scale our payment methods as well. And also what we needed was resilience within our payments processes. So not only being reliant on one financial institution, which we were back at that point. So we needed to be able to, as our journey progressed, look at more multi-bank operations as well. So we have different banking platforms that we can engage with through Access Pay to create that contingency.
Well, thanks, Clara. Yeah, and really looking forward to that journey as well that we're building on as well, just to support with those contingent routes. Raj, from your experience, what patterns do you see in how financial institutions identify their critical services?
So I think there's been a big drive for organisations that are regulated by, for example, the FCA or the PRA to look at the impact of their processes on customer or impact to market, and that's been the foundation for the regulatory requirements over the last 2 or 3 years and the work that's been undertaken by many organisations. So very much a regulatory focus, very specific, and that's been the right thing to do. And I think what that's driven is organisations to take a step up in their maturity. So we're all aware that we have processes that could impact and influence our customers, our members. But this regulation or recent regulations have driven a bit more of a spotlight and identifying them, being super specific about the impact that they have on those categories around impact to market and also impact to customer. What that's also meant is we've now got a clear understanding about the dependencies that we have within our organisation on people, process and technology. but also on third parties. What that's now driving, I think, a lot of organisations to do is perhaps rethink their focus on critical business services. So how do we extend that out to build a resilient enterprise? So it's more than just looking at those things that focus on that we focus on from a regulatory perspective. How do we build something that is sustainable and provides a solid platform for growth? And some of that is also about extending out the remit of your critical business services to those outside the regulatory focus. And in doing so, actually what you're doing is creating a more resilient organisation. And also by doing so, you're probably identifying pinch points that exist within the organisation around your people, your process and technology. And I guess Clara just talked a little bit there about the impact that manual processes have. They typically slow things down. They introduce error potentially, and they also could be pinch points for fraud or misstatements. So building solutions that use automation, use technology to solve the answer is a great way to go. And I think we're seeing a lot of organisations now that have gone through that mapping exercise to identify critical business services, see there are vulnerabilities in those processes, to then think about how do we invest to address them in the future.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thanks, Raj and Clara. And then, you know, we often do hear about sort of resilience by design as well. So, I mean, probably a question for you, Raj. What does this concept actually mean in practice?
It's a really interesting one. I'm keen to get Clara's perspective on the journey that Darlington have taken. But I think it's one of those terms it's a phrase that's definitely being used more and more in the boardroom. And it sometimes lacks clarity in actual practice. But I guess at its core, what I see it meaning is it's building resilience, so the ability to respond, recover, adapt to incidents or events as they occur, into how we design systems, how we design services, and how we build our operations. Not doing that at the end, but doing it at the start. And so this is, for me, is about not retrofitting controls after the fact, but shaping the way that you build change into the organisation. Here's the hard part, right? That sounds simple in what I've just said. It's really tough because actually building resilience in by design is making trade-offs, and it's about looking at, right, how much money do we have to invest in this thing that's going to give us resilience, but actually there is a limitation in terms of the solution, our ability to invest. What trade-offs do we need to make? And so it's about asking those hard questions about what we're willing to compromise, what's non-negotiable and what is a negotiable. How much downtime can we accept and in what form? And are we designing for efficiency, graceful failure, or fast recovery? You know, which one of those options is it? Some of this is also then tied back to risk appetite. So it's not just about technical capabilities, it's about doing the right thing for the organisation, doing the right thing for the customer, but doing that right at the start of the process rather than as an afterthought when an incident occurs. Clara, I welcome your views on that as well.
Yes, I was going to say, Raj, I would add to that. So I think you're absolutely right. I think as part of the Ops Resilience regulation, we have been through all of our critical activities, mapped them, understood where our vulnerabilities were, and wanted and needed to invest. But what we also, as I mentioned previously, we also accepted that we needed to move to more. We had legacy hardware that was end of life, so we had to make some quite large investment into our core IT infrastructure, which, Raj, you'll be aware that you supported us, DCR supported us through with some assurance over that quite high level strategic IT project, which has just completed this year. So that was a huge investment from our board in not necessarily our critical activities per se, but it was about building that resilience for our internal resilience that then is that underpins our performance across our critical activities going forward. So I think that it is important that it's not just about the important business services, it's also about your core infrastructure and how resilient that is. And we've now moved to more cloud-based services and away from those physical owned assets.
Well, thank you. And yeah, as mentioned, that's really useful. And you mentioned about cloud-based services, and of course, as part of that, it just then includes sort of the third-party management that's required as well from your end. So, Clara, your work on implementing, I guess, sort of multiple banking relationships, is quite interesting as well. So, are you sort of able to share sort of the more the contingency approach that you've had within Darlington?
In terms of, third party in itself and from a resilience perspective is quite a large topic. But in terms of our contingency approach from a payments perspective, we were aware that we were heavily reliant on one supplier and one platform at the beginning of our journey. So we needed to broaden that scope so we could be resilient. And as we've seen over the last few months, even a number of large banks do fail, and I think it's about expecting failure and then how you, as Raj mentioned, respond and recover to that. So having multiple contingencies was really important to us. And as we're moving through our relationship with Access Pay, we are broadening our multi-bank relationship so that we do have contingency, not only across our banking relationships, but also with our Access Pay relationship as well. So we have a contingency approach where we would be independent of any of our suppliers, and that's been really key to our resilience journey from a payments perspective, because a number of our important business services are payments related.
Well, thank you. And then I guess, Raj, from your perspective, with the increasing sort of regulatory focus on third-party relationships, what advice would you give to financial institutions?
That's a great question. So I think the first thing I'd say is that there's a lot of focus on supplier risk management and supply chain risk management, and rightly so. But I think the reality is today we live in a world where we are so reliant on third parties that no organisation can do everything themselves, and that's the reality of the world we live in. So now accepting that when we work with third parties, especially if they're moving into the partner territory, I talk about risk management, but also in the context of opportunity and performance management. So how do you get the best out of your suppliers so they can deliver the best for you, so that you can support your customers in the best way? Now, coming on to the risk management piece, clearly we talk about resilience from a perspective of cyber and technology. Those are the types of things that come up more and more in the press these days, with breaches of third parties that an organisation is using, or system failures that lead to downtime. So from my perspective, it's a broad topic, and it's a topic that I could probably talk to for hours on end. But what I would say is when getting into relationships with third parties, being very clear on the objective, and is that organisation the right fit for you? Making sure that you're doing the right due diligence at the start. And as strange as this sounds, it's almost planning for a bit of a divorce at the end, should I say, as in there may be things that go wrong where you need to exit from that supplier. You might need to have multiple relationships with suppliers. Again, to the point that Clara mentioned about using multiple banks, there is a need for that. And I guess the other part in the middle of the bringing on board a supplier through to the exit supplier is actually just good performance management. It's making sure that they understand your goals, you understand their goals, and how you work together to deliver really positive outcomes. And I think those organisations that do that really well have a really integrated supply chain, work with partners really well. I think that those that don't do those activities tend to be the ones that have challenges and issues throughout that whole process.
Yeah, well, thanks, Raj. And I guess looking beyond those processes and systems, and really focusing on what actually keeps an organisation resilient are people. So, Raj, you've mentioned, or we've spoken about in the past, about the concept of human-centred resilience. So, could you elaborate a bit further on what's meant by that, please?
Yeah, I can give a perspective of what it means to me, and I guess there'll be different views from different people. But what I would say is, from again, my own personal experience over the last 20 years or so, the reality is we have businesses today that are fueled by technology, data. Everyone talks about being technology businesses or data businesses, but we are also businesses that are run by people for people, so you can't get away from that. And the other part, looking about the response and recovery side from a resilience point of view, I often find that the most pressurized and difficult circumstances are when you're having to respond to an incident, and sometimes actually it's even worse when it's a prolonged incident. So this is or the term human-centered resilience for me is about how do you build that capability within your people to be able to respond, make the right decisions in the right way when they're under pressure, such that actually you feel that they are protecting the organization, but actually they're protecting themselves, and that they're doing the right thing for you, and they feel confident making those decisions. There's nothing worse than being in a position where you feel like you can't make a decision because of the consequences. So some of this is about organizations helping their teams, their individuals, to be the best version of themselves whilst they're in that working environment.
Well, and Clara, are you able to sort of share how you address the human element of resilience at Darlington?
I think the three words I would use would be testing, testing, testing. I think the more testing we do in these sort of fire drills or scenario tests, which would be key to the ops resilience regulation, is just to keep testing those and making sure that you have clear sets of documentation for decision makers around what decisions they're making across a variety of scenarios. So we have just revisited our crisis management framework and understand who those teams of people are, and pulling those together for fire drill exercises, in addition to also testing at maybe more junior levels to make sure that in periods of stress or small stress periods, more junior staff are empowered to make those decisions and understand what's expected of them in because it will happen in those periods of stress. So I would reiterate testing.
Thanks, Clara. And obviously just sort of looking ahead, what do you see as the next evolution in operational resilience for building societies?
So I think from my perspective, I think the reporting will be key. I think in terms of now the regs are the 31st of March has passed. I think it's now about how we report on operational resilience and how we report on incidents. I think that's where we're doing a lot of thinking about that at the moment. We're also operational resilience for us is not a one and done. So we're just going through an iteration of our operational resilience framework, sort of testing it again and making sure that we mature our thinking from a framework perspective. And also, I think a key element will be, as Raj touched on, around third-party management and stressed exit or controlled exits. When those relationships need to end, how is that done without any added risk, and continuing to be resilient across your critical activities?
Well, thank you. And then I guess for Raj, from your view across the sector, what trends should institutions be preparing for?
I think I'm going to try to answer that question in a couple of different ways. I think I'd echo everything that Clara has just talked about in terms of moving from what was a regulatory objective end of March 2025 into something that's now well embedded, and using things like metrics and testing to prove that and embed roles and responsibilities. I think the biggest thing that will drive benefit for financial services firms, building societies, will be the actual embedding. So turning it from something that is a framework that sits on a shelf to actually something that is lived within and it's lived and breathed within the organisation. So again, it's moving past just one person or one team that owns operational resilience as a framework through to actually it's owned across the organisation. It means different things, but actually when it comes together, it means the same thing for the organisation. So that's perhaps one way of looking at it. I think the other part of what next for ops res, I think there's so many different things that are going on globally. Geopolitics is playing a key part in what happens for most organisations, one way, shape or form, and I guess it's planning for things that might have been in the past, things that are unlikely to, very unlikely to happen. those things are happening because of the way that we have our supply chains, the way that we interact with other countries. They have a knock-on impact to what we do day to day within this country. So it's planning for those black swan events and thinking through how those might play out in practice and building those scenarios to, as Clara said, to test. It's going to be super key.
Excellent. No, really looking forward to what's coming. And I think we're sort of coming towards the end of the webinar as well. So just thank you, Clara and Raj, for such an insightful, thought-provoking discussion. I mean, it's become clear that operational resilience isn't just about compliance anymore. It's about designing organisations so that they're built to endure, adapt, grow, by embedding that sort of resilience into systems and culture. So from sort of the automation to the human-led response, we've seen how resilience by design's becoming a real competitive edge. So thank you to everyone who's joined us today. We hope the session sparked ideas, conversations and practical steps you can take back to your own organisations. If you'd like to continue the conversation and find out more about how we, Access Pay, DCR or Darlington Building Society are sort of shaping that future for operational resilience, please don't hesitate to reach out. But thank you, everyone.